Good morning and happy Tuesday 10 at 10. Thank you very much. It's a beautiful, warmer day. The weather, spring is around the corner, but we're still getting great questions from the bakers. We're sending it to BAKERpedia, and every Tuesday we answer your questions. So without further ado, let's get started. So we were asked the first question. Somebody wants to know what the difference is between a sponge endo system and a Chorleywood process. So they're very different. Still the end result is making bread. The Chorleywood process is a continuous high-speed mixer, so where it mixes into some type of a slurry and being deposited. Usually it requires a lot of conditioning of the dough, oxidizing and type of agents to be able to create some recovery, because it's a lot of shear, a lot of stress that goes on the dough. As a sponge endo system, it requires taking a portion of, let's say if you make a bread and you're using 1 kilo of flour, that a portion of the kilo, maybe either 500 grams, 300 grams, or up to 700 grams, will be used to make a sponge, to basically make another dough that's going to be pre-fermented for about 3 hours to 4 hours. And then that dough that is pre-fermented will be used to make a dough. So the sponge endo system is a lengthier process, and the Chorleywood process is more of a continuous system. Chorleywood comes from England. It was named after a gentleman, I think, called Chorleywood, if I recall it right. And that was to use that. The first time I was introduced to that system was back in Europe, and when they would make some type of sandwich breads. And I was surprised to see the first time where it was almost like poured like a batter into the pan, and then you will get a nice soft bread. But two different systems. Then it's a question of how you're trying to set your operation. I tend to lean towards a little more fermentation. So the sponge and dough, I think, is a classic and easy to use. So, but great questions. Now we have a question regarding flatbreads. And the question is asking, what is the best enzyme to use for flatbreads to get color? So just let's think about it, just to get color. So my first question, to your question would be, why do you need an enzyme for color? Because you can get some enzymes that would basically cleave the carbohydrate, the starches, and make them into shorter chains to get some type of dextrose to get a little more coloration. But as you do that, you might also damage your shelf life. So, and not knowing your system, it could be, if you don't get enough color, it could be that your pH is too low. It could be due to the water. Usually to get more color, we're talking about Maillard reaction, you're trying to get nicer cross color, and you will do it with a reducing sugar and some enzymes, and reacts, and then you will get your Maillard. You have different ways of getting sugar or color or brown color on your flatbread. And not necessarily I would go to enzymes as my go-to solution to get color, because enzymes, as we're all aware, they will work on different substrates, and based on the enzymes you pick, they usually go for a job. But if it's a job just to give color, there are other ways that will be more economical in the long run and will not create issues, because enzymes, when they're in the dough process, they keep on working and being active. So not knowing your process, that's not what I would recommend. You know, like amylase usually would be the solution, but again, within the world of amylases, there's lots of different amylases that people, you know, how they cleave, what they cleave, and based on the manufacturers. But I've never heard anybody says I'm going to get color and good use an enzyme. Usually, when we're trying to get color, we'll add a little bit of dextrose because it's economical, and dextrose has a lower caramelization point than regular sucrose or sugar, so therefore you will get a nicer color on it. That's one little thing that I would do. But good question. Next question: how to pick for the best butter for laminated dough? Um, well, I've heard that question, but let's think of, you know, laminated dough. For those who maybe have not heard the terminology, laminated dough implies any folded doughs such as croissants, puff pastry, danishes are falling into the category of laminated. And a lot of, you know, croissants or puff pastry would be using butter, because butter gives, come on, it gives great flavor to your sweet goods or to your croissants. So then the question is, what's the best butter for it? So usually a best butter contains around 80 to 83% fat, solid. So, and it varies. You can see, and the rest is water. So you want to minimize it. But here's the key: selecting one butter. That's why you see most of the laminated butter sold. It's a blend, and the reason why they're going with a blend, because think about it. As a cow, how does the how do we make the butter? We make the butter from the milk, and the cows, you know, what they eat versus, even if it's a cow from Europe that is grazing in the grass, the diet from summer to winter varies, because in the winter the diet varies, and the composition of the butter will vary from summer to spring always. And then you have to worry about the key to selecting the right butter is understanding the right ratio of saturated versus unsaturated fat for butter. And that's how people gauge it, because as you make it, it's also the ability for the butter and within the butter of the crystal formation of alpha or beta crystals. And that's another conversation where how it creates the mouthfeel and how it behaves. So there are companies that are basically selling butter, just specifically modified butter, just to get the same consistency. Think about it as when you're buying flour. You know, you're buying a flour from the miller. They take a specification and they try to match it every time you get that flour, so you get the same results. Same thing with butter. So I would go look for specific vendors who sell those things. And if you want to stick with butter, try to go with a brand that you experiment with, and you know it's not changing. But the key is, which is true, is how they're being fed, and where, who's making it, and how, you know, they keep their consistency, because you're looking for technical consistency. You're not looking for, oh, it tastes great, which is what most butter you buy today. Now you're trying to use the butter to get a functionality to be able to give you premium laminated products. And but excellent question. I hope, you know, it answered your question. But that's a good way to, you know, create consistency within a product, is by always seeking more information and learning more about what you're doing. Um, uh, Questions: how much lecithin is needed to replace one whole egg, one egg yolk? So just, you know, can you take powdered or liquid lecithin to replace an egg? You know, in simple answer, it's yes and no. And why? Because most of the lecithin is found in the egg yolk, and the large egg contains around 126 milligrams of choline, which choline is where the lecithin is found. So, and if you look soy, if you know, most of the lecithin you can find today, either on a powder or liquid, it's soy lecithin because it's abundant, it's less expensive. I did find a egg lecithin once that was sold, but it's sold for pharmaceutical, and it's out of the, super expensive. So I would not recommend that. So if you're trying to replace it, play with soy, but soy has different functional properties than an egg lecithin. If you were to compare egg lecithin with soy lecithin, you'll find that the functionalities are different. They have similar emulsifying properties, but in different formats. So at this point, I think, you might have to, in order to replace an egg, or because remember, you're replacing the egg yolk because that's where the lecithin. If you're replacing the egg white, it's a different, as a whole egg is different. You will have to add other ingredients to basically bind, and some proteins, and because you're looking at more functionality coming from an egg than just emulsification. So replacing it, you have a lot of great ingredients that I would look for. BAKERpedia has a lot of good, ingredients. So companies that they're working with to replace eggs, you can be using different type of fibers in combination maybe with some lecithin to create a good texture that you're looking for, that can, where you can remove the eggs. That's the way I would do it. And hopefully, I wish you best of luck, in your research and development work by trying to replace that. But again, that's it. That was the last question for today. So I thank you, all of you, to be watching Tuesday 10 out of 10. And I wish you a fantastic day, and hopefully soon with a warmer day where we can all be going outside. So you have a great day, my friends, and I'll see you next week.